The night was heavy with a suffocating silence as Emma's car glided through the foggy, deserted road. The occasional screech of an owl echoed, and the faint rustling of trees swaying in the wind did little to calm her unease. She had taken a wrong turn on her way back to the city, and her GPS was of no help in this remote area. The road grew narrower, and the forest surrounding it seemed to come alive, with shadows dancing ominously under the dim moonlight. Emma tried to reassure herself that it was just her imagination, but deep down, she felt the weight of something watching her. Out of nowhere, her car's engine sputtered and died. She cursed under her breath and stepped out, the chilling air biting into her skin. As she fumbled with her phone to call for help, she realized there was no signal. Panic began to creep in, but she forced herself to stay calm. A faint light flickered in the distance, barely visible through the thick trees. Reluctantly, Emma decided to follow it, hoping to find help. Her footsteps crunched against the gravel, the sound eerily loud in the stillness. The light grew brighter as she approached what appeared to be an old, abandoned mansion. The structure was massive, with cracked walls, broken windows, and an air of decay that screamed danger. But Emma had no other choice. She pushed open the heavy wooden door, which groaned in protest. Inside, the mansion smelled of mildew and dust, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the vast hall. The flickering light she had followed came from a single candle on a table near the staircase. It was as if someone had been expecting her. "Hello," Emma called out, her voice trembling. There was no response. She hesitated, but the biting cold outside and her stalled car pushed her to move further into the mansion. As she explored, she noticed peculiar details: portraits of faceless figures lining the walls, a grand piano with keys stained red, and a mirror that seemed to distort her reflection, making her look older and frail. Every creak of the floorboards under her feet felt like a scream in the silence. Suddenly, a chilling laughter echoed through the hall. Emma froze, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she shouted, but only the laughter responded. She turned to run, but the door she had entered through was now gone, replaced by a solid wall. Her breathing quickened as she stumbled back into the main hall. The candle had been replaced by a dim, flickering lantern. Shadows began to move on their own, forming grotesque shapes that danced along the walls. Whispers filled the air, unintelligible but undeniably sinister. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice whispered, close to her ear. Emma spun around, but no one was there. Her vision blurred as fear took over, and she stumbled into a room filled with old toys. Dolls with cracked faces and missing eyes stared at her from dusty shelves. One of them moved its head, its painted lips forming a smile. Emma screamed and backed out of the room, only to find herself in a different hallway altogether. The mansion seemed alive, its corridors twisting and shifting as if to trap her. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was a tall, shadowy man with glowing red eyes. He began to walk toward her, slow and deliberate. Emma ran, her legs trembling with exhaustion and fear. She burst into a room that looked like an old study, with books scattered everywhere. In the center of the room was a journal, its pages filled with frantic handwriting. One line stood out: "The house feeds on fear. It won't let you leave." Emma felt a cold hand on her shoulder and turned to see the shadowy figure inches away. She screamed and shoved him away, but her hands passed through him as if he were made of smoke. The figure grinned, revealing jagged teeth, and whispered, "Run." She bolted out of the study and down another corridor, finding herself in a dining room where a feast was laid out. The food was rotting, maggots crawling over the dishes, and the chairs around the table were occupied by skeletal figures. One of them turned its head toward her and said in a raspy voice, "Stay, join us." Emma's screams echoed through the mansion as she ran blindly, desperate for an exit. She found herself back in the main hall, where the shadowy figure stood waiting. This time, there were others with him, faceless figures from the portraits, their outlines shimmering like a mirage. "You can never leave," they chanted in unison. Emma fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. The walls began to close in, the shadows enveloping her completely. Her screams were swallowed by the darkness. The next morning, Emma's car was found on the side of the road, empty. The authorities searched the area but found no trace of her. The mansion, which locals claimed had burned down decades ago, remained a chilling legend. Some say on foggy nights,